Now, a company that is a $3.5 billion company, has $210 million a year in revenue, and thousands of employees, is that really a startup? Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Future Internet Billionaire. My name is Josh, and today we are going to dive into what is a startup in 2020. Alright, so startup, trendy term, we hear it all the time. What is a startup in 2020? Now, the dictionary definition of a startup is actually a company that has started up recently, right? They just started out. When you hear startup, doesn't that technically mean that every single business that started, the restaurant, the gym, the nail parlor, the cafe, whatever it is, that just started recently, wouldn't those all be startups? Well, technically, yes, by the dictionary definition, but that's not really how our world defines a startup. That's not how you hear it in the media. That's not how you hear people talking about it. So if it's not really based on the dictionary definition that people are defining startups, what is the definition? What are the rules in 2020? One thing that I found is a complete disclaimer in all of my research, including I run a startup, so by the way, I live in this world. But based on the research that I have found is there are actually no real consistent rules to a startup. That's actually one thing that's consistent, is there's no consistency in the definition. But here's what I was able to figure out based on everything and the world that I live in right now. Startups typically set out to build a massively scalable company. So it's different in terms of like the cafe that just opened. It's an incredibly scalable company. You're thinking Airbnb, Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, WeWork, Slack, Snapchat. I could rattle them off for days. Tesla, there's a whole bunch. It's companies that go out to change the game and set up what most of the time is their goal for world domination in billion-dollar companies. They usually go on to raise millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, or even billions of dollars in venture capital. They set out to hit that unicorn status. The unicorn status in a startup, when you hear a startup is a unicorn, is $1 billion valuation company. If they hit that billion, they're a unicorn. Every startup is generally setting out to hit that goal, become the next $1 billion unicorn, or to be acquired for hundreds of millions of dollars by Google or Facebook or whoever else. And you can think about Nest, WeChat. A lot of these huge companies that go on, or Twitch, they got acquired for over $1 billion, I believe, from Amazon. Companies that go on for the acquisition path, they're going for big time, right? It's not just to build a lifestyle business, they're going big. Now, I rattled off Uber, Airbnb, Tesla, Slack, WeWork, Snapchat, and I started to think that, hey, these are really big companies. Like, these are not small companies. If those are super large companies, when does a company stop being a startup? When does it mature out of that phase? Like I said earlier, there's actually no real definition to a startup, because across all of these companies, everything that just started last year and only has, $100,000 in revenue, or you have the massive companies that have hundreds of millions in revenue, the numbers of revenues, employments, size and scale, and everything like that ranges so broadly. An example of that would be, and you can let me know in the comments below if you think this is still a startup or not, is back in 2013, Uber was still a startup, right? Now 2013, that's 7 years ago, but it was still a startup, a trendy, super hot startup, by the way. It raised a whopping $307 million in venture capital. $307 million in venture capital at a valuation of $3.5 billion. At the same time, it also had revenues of $210 million a year and thousands of employees between their drivers, their headquarters, developers, everything. Now, a company that is a $3.5 billion company, has $210 million a year in revenue, and thousands of employees, Is that really a startup? I mean, like, what in the world? That sounds crazy. Like, is that actually a startup? I would like to say that to anybody that's not in the tech space, in the trendy startup space, it's absolutely not a startup to them, right? When they look at Uber and evaluate Uber, it's actually a multinational logistics company that has achieved incredible success in scale. Like one that would rival traditional logistic companies, from shipping companies to trucking companies. It looks wildly successful and scaled to a huge scale that most of these companies have never achieved. When you're thinking about that, you're like, wow, okay, so they actually are quite big, quite successful, and have achieved some significant dominance. Why would a company actually want to still retain that startup title instead of we are the established enterprise successful business? Why wouldn't you want to do that? Here's what I found is that startups actually hold on to this startup title for as long as they can because it entails certain things about their company. When you say you're a startup, it brings unspoken information, an unspoken description. Meaning, when I say I'm running Uber, this logistics startup, what that means is we're being really innovative. It entails innovation. It entails rapid growth. Startups are all about rapid growth in scale. It implies that we are doing new and exciting things, and that is really a great thing to communicate when you're talking about trying to capture the attention and win over the consumer audience, right? Or businesses or whoever you're actually trying to go after. Startups are innovative. They're growing fast and they're doing the new and exciting things in this world. So all of those things that come with the startup title help them get media hype, help them raise venture capital, additional rounds, right? You can see this company, like the Uber example, they go on to raise hundreds of millions of rounds, and that happens over a series of investments. So they want to keep that hype. They want to keep that hot because it helps them raise venture capital, and it helps them keep interest and intrigue in the world so that people pay attention to that. Now, with all of those things and all of that value, it contributes to their growth. It contributes to their quest for market dominance. Speaking of growth, speaking of media attention, I would really appreciate if you could smack that like button. Maybe not smack it, just hit it, because that really helps me with the YouTube algorithm. It really helps other people find the video. It helps me know that you like the video. So if you could just do that real quick, I'd really, really appreciate it. All right, let's get back. Now, with all of the benefits that I just talked about from holding on to that startup title for as long as you could, why would you ever want to leave the startup land and be defined as a boring company? Why is that even appealing? So as you can see, it's actually really not. Like, people want to hold on to startup for as long as they can because it helps give them an advantage. Now, a real example of this and how the startup title gave a company an advantage in a way that other companies in the same industry, in the same space, didn't get was WeWork. Now, WeWork grew and met with some very interesting endings and corrections, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when WeWork was on its rise to market dominance, when it was on its height through this path of startup world. WeWork went on to raise so much money and balloon into a $48 billion valuation. That is a significant company. $48 billion. Just think about that. But the problem with that was that it was a leasing and a retail space, right? Or not retail space, but a leasing and co-working space that people rented. So were they really a startup? And they even defined themselves as like, they lived in the tech startup world, this co-working space. So with the living in the tech startup world, that's how they were able to scale to that massive valuation and get an edge over competitors, because they were very similar companies, co-working space companies that were scaling fast, had great revenues, but that were not under the techie startup world, that were only valued at, a couple $100 million to just under $1 billion when they had the same amount of space available and more revenue than WeWork. So how in the world was WeWork a $48 billion company and they never were able to scale past even $1 billion? It was the power of attention. It was the power of the media hype. It was the power of the startup. It really was. It's what allowed them to go on to raise these consecutive rounds, to stay in the media as this thriving next massive unicorn startup. They utilized that trend, they utilized that term to help them scale so much faster and way past their competitors simply because they were able to leverage that to their advantage. And you can see after a while, it all wore off and it came ballooning down. But again, they used that to stay in the media and grow very, very rapidly. So one thing to summarize this video, since there's no hard definition around what is a startup and what is not, I wanted to summarize it because I gave you a lot of information and a lot of examples. But I wanted to summarize what I was able to conclude about the world of startups and what they actually are. A startup is a company that is actually focused on scaling at all costs. It's very scale focused. A startup is not a business that is focused on the good fundamental fiscal practices of building a business. They want to scale fast, change an industry, change a market, or change the world. A startup is actually a mindset and a style of building a business. They don't focus on profit, they focus on growth. They don't focus on cutting costs. They focus on raising another round of funding to cover their ever-increasing costs. Being a startup actually says more about your approach to business than it says about your scale, maturity, or size of your business. So I hope that made something clear. I hope that kind of demystified the world of startups. Startup is an approach and a mindset to business. It's not hard and fast concrete rules about what a business is. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you hanging in there, watching. If you would like, subscribe to this video and to this channel. I really appreciate it. Let me know if there's anything else you guys want me to talk about, any other thing you want me to demystify or to just kind of communicate or research for you. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to watch this and hang out with me. I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Have a great day.